Hi, I'm Ashley Adamson, and I just got over COVID, so excuse me for my voice or if I have to cough at anything. But we're going to talk about something super, super deep right now, and I think a lot of you may not even be exposed to this kind of topic or nuance. This is kind of a rarity in the trans community, which is talking about the spiritualism aspect, being spiritual and having a soul, having a being, how that relates to gender and your own experience. And I'm going to break it down for y'all because I had a request from the trans club member about what is the philosophical implications of being trans beyond just the philosophical, as I would put it. ContraPoints has a philosophical approach to these things, and there are a few other trans YouTubers that are extremely cognitive about how to talk about being trans. But I think that lacks a certain balance. It lacks a certain groundedness and earthiness to the body and also to just the soul, the being, the body. Like there's more to you than just your body and your mind. That's how I see it. It's how I've experienced life. And I don't really just think things through. I feel things through and I discover things and want to learn for myself rather than just be told by someone or read a book about it. So I'm going to tell you about some stuff and maybe you'll be able to find or discover some things through your own introspection and your own adventure in discovering life. Life has so many mysteries to it, and you don't really know until you start looking in all of those dark corners or areas where you've been afraid to explore. And maybe as you are going through your transition, you're kind of starting to discover a lot, right? So I want to talk a little bit about this because it's something that some trans people who are spiritual wonder, is being trans, do you have a soul? How does that work? So here's my answer for you. The way that I look at being, the way I look at gender is I look at it through multiple layers. You have the societal layer, which is how society that you're born into defines how gender exists and what the tropes of the gender are, and what the expectations are of that gender. There's also like your biology, like your, and I'm not talking about chromosomes, I'm talking about if you have testosterone or estrogen. Those chemicals affect your neurological processes. It affects your brain. It affects how it's configured. It affects how you see the world. Being on testosterone, for example, everything becomes more like this and a lot more kind of honing in and one-dimensional attention on things. Whereas with estrogen, it feels more like this, and it feels like I've become a lot more sensitive to everything in the environment, and more especially noticeable when I'm in a room full of women and then a man walks in. You can see how the whole dynamic can shift and change just based on our chemical and societal interactions. So I thought that's interesting. And then your brain, there's your brain aspect. So your brain has its own neurological configuration, but I also believe, and I think science is still figuring this out, that your brain can be configured female or can be configured male, even if your body is not matching that. And so there's some theories around this, but essentially it comes down to like when your brain and your body is developing in the fetus. I'd love to know more about that. I am actually talking to a researcher about this kind of stuff and we'll make a video at some point in the future. But there, like to recognize that my brain is just wired female took a huge relief off of my own experience because suddenly, I mean, how, like if you're trans and you were told by like a brain imager, I should ask my sister about this because she's a neuroscientist that does brain imaging. But if a neuroscientist said, hey, we looked at your brain and it actually looks like it's female, how would you feel? Would you feel kind of like, oh, like this is not just in my imagination. This is not me just trying to like replace something in my life or cope with something in a weird way. Like I'm just wired this way and that's it. And now all I have to do is make decisions and align my life to help me find alignment, right? Like that would make things so simple. And so there's your biological processes, your neurological configuration, and the societal aspect to gender. And then the fourth and final one is your soul. It's your spirit. It's your being, whatever you want to call it. I typically call it being or spirit. Soul has a little associations with it that I just don't like, you know, like Christian or like soul music or whatever. Like I just want to talk about your being essentially. And your being is your spirit. The way that I see this is your being is another word for an essence. Your essence has an identity. When it has an identity, it is your being. It is who you speak from when you say I, or a portion of what you speak from. Your brain also has a perception of what I is, and your body also has a perception of what it is. And so when I say I, it's like my body and my brain and my soul are all speaking as a together unit, like we are cooperating to work together. But it kind of like moves back and forth, like your subconscious operates and makes most of the decisions. And so you are governed in part by your subconscious and your body and the brain and how it works. But there is a soul and there is a spirit, there's a being. And this being will come through depending on your consciousness and your state of being, will come through in ways where it's very clear and very distinct. It's more obvious for kids because kids don't have a lot of intelligence developed. They have brains, but they don't have a lot of life experience to draw from. And so what they can draw from is their spirit, their being, which has a plethora of experiences from prior lives or from future lives to draw on and pull in through the way that it's lived. And so for me, I've had enough past life experiences and things come back to me that have allowed me to recognize I'm a warrior spirit. I've been samurai multiple times. I've been like kung fu, martial arts, studying, practitioner, Taoist, Buddhist, you name it. I've had lots of swords and I've killed lots of people. And that's like a little shaming to say because the amount of people that you acknowledge that you've killed and what you've done is kind of like a whole nother thing. And I won't go too far into that, but I've been a male a lot in the past and been a warrior. And that has affected me in a way of how I see the world. I apply myself, like you can abstract, if you live as let's say as a warrior many lifetimes, you can abstract certain lessons and certain states of being that still come with you as a resource when you enter a new body as a container. And like one of those things is discipline and application. And I've had that since before I really even knew what discipline was or how to apply myself. And making sacrifices for oneself, for other people. One of the biggest sacrifices I made when I was a kid was to sacrifice my own gender for taking care of the family and being a male figure and like tucking in my mom to bed because she was so tired from being a single mom and working in a foreign country and stuff. So things like that, it's like you have certain aspects or personality traits that are just inherently your soul. So when it comes back to gender, is your spirit gendered? Well, let's see. Okay, so let's go back to these four things. So is your biology gendered? Yes, it's either testosterone or estrogen. And if you're intersex and don't have the production, you're gonna die. So you need to choose one, right? Is it your brain? Yes, it's also your brain, your neurological configuration. Is it societal? Yes, it's also societal, right? Because I'm wearing a dress. Like this is a dress created in this society. If I was in a different society, I wouldn't be wearing a dress. It wouldn't necessarily be expected of me to wear one. Or there's some societies where men wear dresses, right? And so this wouldn't be as validating, and I wouldn't feel as feminine and cute in it, right? There's triggers. You get these things that cause you to experience and have these kinds of ways of calling out your subconscious with yourself. Wearing a dress triggers a reaction of, hey, I've seen other women wear dresses and I've seen how they look and how I associate that with being female. And so when I put on a dress, I now am living out the association that I've seen in the world. And that is validating because it's reaffirming to me what I've seen in the world, right? Like that is a societal thing for sure. And so when you get your euphoria, that's you just playing with your triggers, how you work with these symbols that your subconscious has embedded deep within its own way of reading the world and causing them to play against each other in certain contexts, like wearing a dress, to create this chemical reaction. So that's amazing. It's also in your brain. And the last one is spirit. So spirit, is the soul, is the spirit, is the being, is it gendered? The answer is a little bit complicated. I would say that it is not gendered in the binary sense, but it is in a polarity, so to speak, of a state of being. And there is a anchor point to the state of being where your soul, your spirit, your being likes to rest. It likes to be. It likes to resonate and vibrate at a certain frequency that feels appropriate for it. I describe my own soul and my own being as a leaning towards being feminine, but there's a huge caveat there, which is there are times where I can be extremely, and I put this into quotes, masculine, because when we're talking about the soul and the spirit, we're not really talking about masculinity and femininity. And I really fucking hate this about New Age circles. Divine femininity and divine masculinity. There is no divine version of femininity and masculinity. It's just you're using the limitations of your language to express something, which is that like if you abstract what masculinity is and you abstract what femininity is in a more spiritual setting, you really just get two kind of shapes. One shape in the femininity is kind of more expansive and more amorphous and kind of feels more like this. And then this masculinity, or we could just say on the other end of the spectrum of this polarity, is kind of more like a close-ended, precise thing that kind of goes like that. And it's like that. And we can say that's kind of, we call it masculinity. Aggression goes towards masculinity. It goes towards close-endedness, argumentation, fiery conflict. Femininity, like, I mean, have you ever been in a women's circle or seen a bunch of women talking together? It's like, oh, I don't know. What do you think? Like, let's just all talk about our feelings and what we're feeling, and let's check in and stuff like that. And that's very open-ended, and it's very kind of like, it's non-precise. And I actually get very impatient sometimes around women that can't make decisions or make things very clear. And my brain, which has been under a testosterone regime, which is wired female, and my spirit is female, or more on the polarity of the feminine, can do this. It can do precise speaking, where it converges on a thought and makes it articulated, but then goes back out into the expanse of the infinite and finds things and shapes and forms. And when it arrives at something that needs to be concluded or created, it then pierces that into the polarity that is tight to then give it to you, to give words and language to an expression. So my polarity on the spectrum is I like to be floating and I like to be in this what we call feminine polarity, but I can be very concise and very masculine, or on this side of the polarity with my essence and my being. It's something that I just need to learn as a warrior, right? Like you need to, when you kill someone, you need to be able to hit at just the right angle. You need to slice the sword in such a right way, and you cannot focus on anything but complete elimination of the person that you're going to slay. And that aspect of the practice and the concentration and effort that I put into that in my past lives, I put so much effort into that, especially as a samurai, that it is with me in the abstract. I never have a desire to, most of the time, I never have a desire to kill anyone. I never have a desire to slice, or I do actually have a desire to slice, but I never have a desire to actually like fight anyone or go off and slay people. That was just my job. That was what was called upon me. But if you abstract what is slicing and what is like the practice and the art of the sword, it's like I'm still practicing it now. I'm practicing this precision in my words and how I'm getting these abstract ideas over to you. I am slicing with my thoughts. I am taking a thought, forming it in my head, whipping it up, and then like, hata! How do you feel about yourself? Where are you in your life? Like, what is going on with you? these questions are ways of getting you to a location, and I've used my words to get you to a certain place, and now I'm precisely and concisely doing something to express that. So for you, and thinking about your own experience with your soul and your being, if you're new to this idea of having a spirit and how do you differentiate, well, first of all, it's you got to spend time reflecting and looking inwards and meditating, seeing what's your subconscious programming versus what is your conscious trying to program into you. You have this higher conscious, this spiritual being, this spiritual essence that is trying to get in this body and give you information about what your mission is, what your spirit is, what you want out of this life, what your spirit wants for you out of this life. For me, when I kind of came to this realization of, oh my God, this aspect of me was missing, this feminine part, she like fell into me. It was literally like night and day. The feminine aspect I had exiled when I was a child, and it just like dropped in me and it came into my body, and it was so clear. It was so crystal clear that it was this other part of me, but it had been gone for so long. It was like black and white. And it was this weird experience of seeing my masculine self and seeing my feminine self and seeing them as distinct, separate beings, but still having the location of when they looked inside themselves, they still saw an I. And I was seeing two eyes and watching both of these eyes. So there's like three eyes, right? Like I am the watcher, and then I am a being, and I am a being, and we are all I, merging and converging in the same body, in the same consciousness. It was like quite an experience, and I had like 6 months of actually using we because of the integration process of that. But I can say firmly now that I have a stance as a spirit and as a being, and this is my leaning. I lean in this way. This is how, and it kind of looks like my entire lineage of my being and my essence, my soul, was kind of working up to this. Kind of like, hey, like, you're going to be a warrior, but this warrior way is going to teach you all the discipline and things that you need for this life where you're actually going to be a woman, and you're going to have found the things that you wanted as a man in these past lives, and also in your past lives as a woman. But I have like barely many past life memories as a woman. Like I think the only one I have is of being a shaman, and like the doctor aspect of like what I did there. I can't remember any of the other ones, but maybe they'll come later, who knows. So I hope that answers your question. I forgot the name of the person in the trans club, and I hope this gives you something to reflect about in your own life. Like, where are you? Where is your spirit? How do you find this? How do you differentiate between your subconscious, your conscious, and what's programmed into you? And what part of it is just your brain just being? These are all really interesting questions to contemplate, and I encourage you to think about them, write comments, interact in the discussion down below, and if you want, you can join the trans club as well to have this discussion with other trans folks who are warrior mindset, spiritually minded. If you'd like to support me, please support me on Patreon. Please send me a super thanks, some money, yeah, join the trans club and like and subscribe. I'll see you in another episode soon. Bye.